How do you survive 4 days in the dead of winter traveling through the remote Canadian Rockies? Sure, having skills and experience is essential, but having the right gear is equally as important. Very soon here, I'm gonna be spending 4 days traversing mountain passes in deep snow with sub-zero temperatures. So today I'm double checking and going over all the gear that I plan on bringing on that trip and sharing with you guys why it's essential for my survival. I'm still not sure what I'm gonna bring with regards to some piece of gear like this tent. I'm not sure whether I'm gonna go with this one or another one, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Let's start off with the pack. If you follow the channel, you're gonna be familiar with the Mountain Hardwear AMG 75. It's a winter specific pack with a lot of awesome features like an avalanche pocket for my probe and shovel, as well as a ton of straps in order to strap things onto the pack. It also has an amazing carrying capacity, which is going to be essential on this trip because once I put all my gear into my Pack Wizard gear list, it came up to about 40 pounds, including food and water. So I'm going to need a pack that can carry that weight no problem, and the AMG 75 is up to the task. When I'm doing my gear list videos, normally I start with kind of the big items and then work my way down to the smaller items. But on this trip, I think the ditties, the smaller items, are some of the most interesting because they're going to be critical for the type of trip that we're going to be going on. So in the top pocket here, that's where I'm storing most of my ditties. I have my poop kit right at the top here. This is basically just toilet paper and hand sanitizer. We're gonna be staying at campsites on this trip, so there's gonna be outhouses and I can just poop in those and then throw the toilet paper down there. I'm gonna be bringing some extra cordage with line lock hooks on here. These are awesome little devices that you can attach to basically any guy out point on the tent and then deploy them very quickly. So I'm gonna have a couple of these in case it gets really windy. If I bring this tent, it has a lot of guy out points. It also has some built-in guy lines, so I may not need those. We'll see. Like I said, I'm still kind of figuring that out. And then I have my repair kit. If you saw my last trip video, dude, I didn't bring any tools with me, which is stupid, very stupid, especially for where I am and the way that I got here. Then you know that a repair kit's super important. I wish I'd brought this on that trip. It consists of some zip ties, a Leatherman Skeletool, some extra batteries for my avalanche beacon, some light, as well as some duct tape and some chicken wire as well, just in case I need to repair anything like my skis. That's how we're gonna be getting around on this trip. We're gonna be using Alpine touring skis, boots, and bindings. It's one of the best ways to get around the backcountry, especially here in the Canadian Rockies. We're gonna be able to efficiently go uphill and then very efficiently be able to go downhill. But there's a lot of moving parts involved with those systems. They can break, and that's why the repair kit is gonna be essential. I also have my first aid kit in here. On that last trip, I also got a blister on my left heel, and that could potentially be a really big issue. There's a little bit of friction involved with ski touring, so I might have to use some of the Luca tape or the duct tape from my repair kit in order to fix that up. And then we have my full kind of big ditty bag here, and there's a lot of really cool items in here. First up, we have the NU25 headlamp. I'm choosing this headlamp instead of a flashlight or one of my lighter weight headlamps because it has so many lumens. So if we are having to ski in the dark and we're getting to camp very late, then I'm gonna want that extra brightness from that. I'm also bringing the FlexTail Zero pump. So this is a pump in order to inflate my sleeping pad. It makes it so I'm not introducing warm, moist air into my sleeping pad, which then deflates over the course of the night. This is just really nice too after a long day, not having to use your breath to inflate a pad. I've switched over pretty much all the time to using the InCharge 3-in-1 cable, super lightweight cable that allows me to charge basically any of my devices. But probably what I think is the coolest item in this ditty bag is my charger. This is the Nitecore Summit 10,000 milliamp battery. What's really cool about this is that it has a heating element inside of it. So if it senses that it's too cold to operate, it'll turn on that heating element and then warm up the battery so that it can work efficiently even in super cold temperatures down to I think -20 or lower. And then I have my folding toothbrush. I'm not gonna be bringing the trail brush on this trip, and toothpaste tabs. Toothpaste in the wintertime, especially when it gets down to -20, -30, which is what this trip is forecasted to get down to, can freeze. So toothpaste tabs don't freeze and are just a really nice way to brush your teeth while out on the trail. I've spent years dialing in my clothing systems for winter camping trips like this, but I might switch things up on this trip. I'm still gonna be using my Outdoor Research Sky Tour jacket and pants because this setup is insanely breathable and it has a lot of great pockets and features which make it great for ski touring traverses. There's lots of pockets in order to keep things warm on my body, like my Garmin InReach, as well as my water. So there's a pocket right on the inside here where I keep a Platypus soft bottle. It's a liter. I fill this up with water and then I can just store that in there and take sips throughout the day, and it doesn't freeze in very cold temperatures. Right now I'm wearing a puffy underneath my jacket, but when I'm skiing, I'll just be wearing base layers. Normally it'd be a merino wool blend from Outdoor Research if it's quite cold out, or if it's a little bit warmer, then I'd go with something that's pure synthetic. But on this trip, I might switch things up with an Alpaca base layer system. The top and bottom are both made with 85% alpaca wool and then 15% tencel, And I love alpaca wool. It doesn't stink, it doesn't hold on to moisture, and it's quite lightweight for how warm it is. The problem is this trip is supposed to have a lot of variances in temperature, and this system might be a little bit too warm. I know you guys are probably interested in my gloves as well. These are from Decathlon. They're pretty much made especially for ski touring, and I find that they work very well for that. Just a glove, standard synthetic glove that doesn't hold on to a ton of moisture. I've sweat a lot of these and my hands stay warm, and then the glove isn't super wet the next day, so it's really easy to dry them out. And then they have this insulated kind of mitt that goes over top, so if it starts getting cold out, I can just throw this on and then my hands are toasty warm. I've used these gloves in temperatures ranging from freezing 0 degrees Celsius down to minus 35 degrees Celsius, and at those lower temperatures my fingers definitely got cold. I got the screaming barfies once they started warming up in the car, but they work very well down to about minus 25. Let's dive into what's on and in the pack a little bit more. On the outside of the pack, in this kind of pocket out there, I'm gonna keep things I want access to in case we're stopping for a break and I wanna warm up a little bit. I got these over gloves from Decathlon. They're big fleece lined gloves that are waterproof. I can fit these over my insulate gloves that I'm gonna use more around camp. So this glove system really keeps my hands warm, and these are really nice to have for those breaks. And then I have my Decathlon puffy jacket. This is just a big down parka, very warm, very compressible. I've used this in temperatures minus 30, minus 35, and been toasty warm while static. On the right side of the pack, I have my other source of water. So it's inside this Nalgene koozie. It's a HDPE Nalgene, which is just a little bit lighter than the big hard-sided ones. And if I put boiling water here in the morning and then stick it inside the koozie, by the time I get to camp at the end of the day, that water will still be slightly warm. On the other side, we have my camp fuel. So we'll talk about what sort of cook system I'm gonna be using a little bit later once we get inside the pack. And then on the bottom, I have my Nemo switchback foam pads. This has a few different uses. I can put it underneath my sleeping pad in order to add a little bit of R value to it. I can also fold it up and then change on it when I'm changing between all my clothes. It's nice to have something to step on. And I can also use that as insulation for a chair. So a lot of the time we'll dig little tables and chair areas, and I can just put this on, sit onto it, and then not get a really cold butt. Let's open up the pack and dive into some of the bigger items that I have in here, like my cook system, my sleep system, all that good stuff. Right at the top here, I have another foam pad. And this is something that I'm bringing because of the trip that Kane and I did last year, where we were in the Canadian Rockies for 3 days. When we built our little seating areas and then I put my feet on the snow, they'd start getting really cold. So even though my butt and back were warm from the switchback, my feet needed a little bit more insulation than just what was being provided by my booties. So I'm gonna put this on the floor of my little sitting area, and that should keep my feet a little bit warmer. Then we have my food bags. This will just contain all of my food that I'm gonna be using for the trip, 4 days. I have a koozie for my freeze-dried meals. I'm gonna be doing all freeze-dried meals on this trip. And then I have my pink titanium spoon, which, as you guys know, if it starts getting really cold, then I can just put this in my sleeping bag and it's gonna keep me a little bit warmer. This is my pot, Toke's 2-liter titanium pot. I have my stove system in here, but like I said, we'll get into that in a second. Then we have my booties. These are one of my favorite pieces of gear. They're from Mountain Equipment Company, which is kind of like the REI of Canada, but they have this insulated booty part with a nice insulated sole, and then this cuff that comes up. So if you're walking around in very deep snow, then it's not gonna kind of get down inside the boot. These are amazing, great for winter time because you can take off your ski boots, or if you're hiking, then your hiking boots, and then just throw on these and let your foot kind of air out and warm up. And I have my camp clothes. There's a lot of stuff in here, a lot of very warm clothes. I'm not going to go over everything that's in here because it might change depending on the conditions. But if you want to check out all the gear that I am bringing, even if I might have missed talking about it in this video, then you can check out my Pack Wizard gear list at the link in the video description. Everything else in here is part of my sleep system. I'm still not sure on what sleeping pad I'm gonna bring, but right now I'm leaning towards the Nemo Tensor Extreme Conditions. I've tested this one out and it's warm down to minus 35 on snow, so I know it's gonna perform. It's a little bit more comfortable than an Xtherm, but it's also a little bit heavier. So I might bring the Xtherm, save 100 grams, or I might bring the Tensor Extreme and then be a little bit more comfortable. You guys are gonna have to watch the trip video in order to find out what I end up bringing. As usual, I'm gonna have a pillow with me, the Trekology 2.0 pillow, and then my sleeping bag. You guys are not gonna be surprised by this, the Thermrest Polar Ranger. Do I need to say anything more about the Polar Ranger? It's basically just a great winter sleeping bag with a lot of awesome features, including this snorkel, which creates a pocket of air around your face so that your face doesn't get cold if the temperatures really drop. And then I have a synthetic overquilt. This is made with Apex, so it's a synthetic insulation that is, I think, essential when you're winter camping because it moves the dew point from inside your sleeping bag to the synthetic insulation, which manages a lot better. I've talked about this concept before, but I think in any temperatures below -10 where you're using down as your primary source of insulation, you should have some sort of synthetic overquilt in order to protect that down from moisture. Like I said, I'm still a little bit unsure about the tent. I'm going on this trip with 2 other people, which I guess I haven't mentioned so far, but they're also gonna be bringing their own tents, and I might be able to share one of the tents with one of the people, or I could bring my own tent and have my own space, which is kind of nice. This is the Samaya 2.0 tent. It weighs just over 1,300 grams. It's made with Dyneema as well as waterproof breathable fabric on the sides here. This is a great tent for winter camping trips because of how lightweight it is. It's also very structurally sound. It's gonna hold up to any sort of snow load or wind that I might encounter. But what has me second guessing about whether to bring this tent is that I could just save the weight of a tent altogether by sharing a tent with somebody else. As well, this tent doesn't have a vestibule. So if I wanna bring my boots, my pack inside the tent, it starts getting quite cramped in there. So I'm a little bit uncertain still. Right now, I'm probably like 60% lean towards bringing the tent, 40% leaning towards not bringing the tent, but we're gonna have to wait for the trip in order to find out what I end up doing. For the cook system, as a group, we had a lot of discussions about whether to bring white gas or canisters, and what it came down to is the temperatures that we're gonna see. Inverted canister stoves work well down to about -20 degrees Celsius, maybe a little bit colder, but then they start to really drop off in performance, whereas white gas works well at pretty much any temperature out there. So because we're gonna be seeing -30 degrees Celsius on the first night, we decided to go with white gas stoves. So I'm gonna be using the MSR Whisperlight Universal Stove. This is just a bomb-proof stove that works well in basically any temperature if you set it up right. I hadn't used it in a while, and then I had some issues on my last trip because I converted the stove from working with canisters to working with white gas and didn't do that properly. And because of that, I was not able to have a hot meal and I ended up being a little bit hungry on that trip. But I have everything set up properly now. I tested it out, so should be no problem for the trip that we have coming up. I also have this aluminum piece here that I just put on the snow and then put the stove on top of that in order to kind of reflect more heat up. And then in order to provide even more reflection as well as to protect the stove from wind if it is windy out, then I have this windscreen as well, which I'll just put around the pot and the stove. I'll prove to you guys that I have everything set up properly now. We'll get a little bit of gas into the bottom of the stove, light that in order to prime it. So that preheating tube should be nice and warm now, so we'll open the valve back up and then we should get a nice blue flame. There we go, nice clean flame. And I'll be putting the 2-liter Tokes pot on top of that in order to melt snow and create water. I'm nervous for this trip because I'm not in as good of shape as I'd like to be for a trip like this, where we're covering a lot of elevation, a lot of distance in some pretty remote areas. As well, because of my honeymoon and then moving, I haven't been able to get out on as many winter trips, so my winter skills are a little bit rusty right now. The other 2 guys that I'm going on, they're in shape, they have a lot of experience, and I really don't want to be the weak link on this trip. So hopefully all the prep that I'm doing right now kind of sets me up for success. If you want to see the shakedown trip where I test out a bunch of gear that I'm potentially going to be bringing on the 4-day trip, then go check out this video right up here. I definitely was not prepared. A lot went wrong on that trip. I made a lot of mistakes, but I learned a lot and got a lot of the rust shaken off in order to kind of perform for this 4-day trip.